Well, hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm sharing with you some of the end plate designs for the Fiesta RS style spoiler project and the process I went through to turn them into digital parts. So here I am, having done the sculpt, feeling very proud of myself. All done by hand using a sander and a block to get the shape that I'm looking for. Now the next stage of the process is to try and digitise this so I can print out a set for the left and right hand side of the car. That end plate sits at something like a 25-degree angle relative to the vertical, and I've had to do a cutout on the inside so I can mount it onto the lower spoiler. Lovely stuff. So the idea is that you have this mounted on the lower spoiler, it connects to the upper spoiler, and it provides a kind of aerodynamic end cap. So into the computer world we go. So the first step is to take a photo. Taking full advantage of the ruler in the picture, I can then scale that. So I'm able to then take an outline. So you can see I'm using a B-spline tool in FreeCAD to trace around the outside of the part to give me my curves. I'm then able to zoom in and get those points to match exactly to the photo. So I'm getting a pretty good one-to-one replica in 3D of the parts. Now it's a really cool interface. You don't have to be a CAD wizard to do this. You literally push and pull the points till you get the line where you want it to sit. You can move the parts further away, you can move them closer together, and it basically gives you nice control over that spline running around the outside of the part. So there we go, here's a sketch. You can then pad it up to your heart's content and make it into a 3D representation of the end plate. Obviously there's a lot more detail involved, and I was lofting between different sections, creating Boolean operations to subtract volumes. But here's what I've come up with. Now, the part was actually too big to fit on the Creality end of 3 print bed, which is about, I think, 220mm wide. So I've split the part into 2 pieces. Now when you load it into the slicing tool to turn it into G-code, for some reason it's dumped it in vertically, so I've laid that part then down flat, and I'm having a look at where the build supports are going to be. If you have a kind of overhang, the print will need support to stop it warping and going funny. So obviously I'm tweaking the angle that the part sits at on the build plate so that it fits on quite comfortably in the middle. And then let's take a look underneath. You can see that red band. That's the area that I'll have to kind of chip away at for the artificial build supports and sand to make it all lovely and flush. I've also reduced the density of the inner supports within the device itself to reduce the print time. So you can see these are probably, I don't know, 15mm wide or so. And there's the end piece, which you then effectively glue on in the real world, but you print in 2 parts. So it took about 8 hours to print the base part that you see here, so the main kind of outline. And then I moved on to the trailing edge section, which you can see there. So total print time, I would say, is probably getting on for 12 hours. I don't claim to be a 3D printing expert, but you can see here I've really reduced the amount of print material needed to make the part, while still getting a quality that I'm pleased with. So here are the 2 things side by side. Now obviously I've not quite fully replicated every feature because I've got in mind things like build tolerances, which are harder to do with a piece of foam. But you can see here I've got that nice cutout for where it will sit on the lower spoiler, and that feature's replicated really nicely there. So that will just sit in and give a bit of extra support when the 2 things are bolted together. And then I've got the end piece, which should press. Now one of the things you've got to consider is how you want to join the 2 parts together. Now I believe super glue is the best choice for a PLA product, or Gorilla Glue also works quite well, being a plastic friendly adhesive. So I've got some good old fashioned Loctite super glue. I'm going to smear it in finest zigzag artistic fashion all over the surface, press the 2 parts together, and voila, I should have a nice final part I can use for trial fitting. So there we go, taking extra care not to get it in my eyes or all over my skin. I can now press the 2 parts together, get them just right so everything's nicely lined up, and you'll never know there were 2 bits. So there we go. One assembled end plate, entirely 3D printed, but based on a sculpt from the real world. So I'm loving this hybrid working. It hasn't cost me a penny for the CAD software, so I really recommend FreeCAD for these kind of projects. It's powerful enough. Yes, it's not as good as CATIA or SolidWorks, but considering it's free, it's pretty darn impressive. So there we go, really pleased with those 2 interfaces, nicely captured. Now, it wouldn't be a Hengineer video without a montage and getting on with doing some assembly. So the next step is to drill out some interfaces for the strakes that I'd previously 3D printed into the lower spoiler. I can then do a trial fit with the upper spoiler and then put the end plate on and check the fit of everything together. So I'm using a hole template to make sure I get the centre of the strake hole interface about right. And then I'm going to be using a drill to first pilot it and then open it up to full size to take an M6 bolt. So protecting the kitchen work table, chucking down a scrap of wood and punching through there with a standard sort of 2.5mm pilot size drill bit. Just got to take care on the opposite side. When drilling through composite, you can get backface splitting, where effectively you have that jump in force and it rips all the fibres out as you punch through the back of the part. So clamping it down firmly, providing a bit of positive pressure and a nice controlled feed is what you need to prevent that from happening. And we're through. So obviously now wiping away the excess, having a look at the hole, and then moving on to a larger drill bit, so taking it up to sort of 6.5mm, ready to take an M6 bolt with a nice clearance fit. Again, taking care, punching through, not to damage it too much, but you can see even there you've got a little bit of backface splitting there, volcanoing almost as you push through the backface. But that's okay, because it's not the final interface. As you'll see in the next video, there'll be some 3D printed parts being added onto the lower side of the spoiler next. So thinking about assembly time, I'm going to punch through that M6 bolt, Allen head. At some point I'll need to rebate it in so it's completely flush on the lower face. But effectively you then use an Allen driver or an Allen key to screw that all together. With those woodworking fasteners built into the strake, you then have a nice hidden interface that you won't see from the outside. But it's still sort of flexible and wiggleable enough to allow you to line everything up before finally tightening all the parts. Exactly the same process on the other side, and there you have it, a lower spoiler with two rather fetching vertical strakes ready to support the upper spoiler. So here it comes, held by yours truly in a kind of precarious balanced fashion, but it gives an idea for how the part will look when it's finished. So there we go, supported by a finest roll of kitchen towel on the kitchen table. That's the foam part that I made for the end piece, and here's the 3D printed one. Nice and chunky, in keeping with that RS style look, and obviously fully removable and potentially paintable and sandable and treatable into any shape you might want. So there we go. I'm really pleased with how this is actually coming together as an assembly now. The 3D printer is really taking some of the effort out. So there we go. Really pleased then with that interface. I'm going to spend a bit more time now getting the bolting sorted on the lower and upper spoiler into those end plates, coming up in the next video. You can see a nice low profile gap from behind. Obviously I'm going to be working the strakes and the other designs up. So thanks very much all for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series, but for now, engineer out.